Why was the situation allowed to get to where it is now?
The cumulative impact of years, if not decades, of mismanagement. More importantly, the deployment of people into positions of great authority without the technical competence. And above all else, a failure of the regulatory authorities to hold people accountable, so that when they started running up massive debts that they were unable to pay eventually, of course, bankruptcy is an inevitable outcome. So they can't be bailed out. You now have failed state-owned entities, failed municipalities, failed water service providers, and we now have a cumulative problem that collectively as a society we have to deal with.
In the main, Doc, what is the problem with the Vaal River right now?
Remember, the Vaal River sustains probably 60% of the national economy. It's a hugely important river from a socio-economic perspective. And there have been a number of problems, but there are two main categories of problem. The one category of problem is the returning sewage flows going back into the Vaal River. Many of your wastewater treatment works have failed. Just one works alone is returning 120 megalitres. That's 120 million litres of water untreated every day into the river. One sewage works. There are many sewage works. Then, of course, you've had the ping-pong effect of not dealing with the acid mine drainage, the whole mine closure story. So you've had this issue of either acidic water or uranium-contaminated water also flowing in. That's also just been swept away under the carpet and never been dealt with. So the bottom line is, I'm afraid it's a bit of a bad news story, because it's the cumulative impact of at least a decade or more of mismanagement and ultimately of policy failure.
People, there are warnings out already now to say, people, please do not consume this water. How bad is the quality of that water right now? Well,
the water is extremely bad, but I don't want to be alarmist in this, in what I say, and I'm trying to be very responsible in my communication. But it's also very important to understand that Rand Water Board, which is a world-class water services provider, was never engineered or designed to take water that has been so contaminated and make it safe drinking water. Rand Water was engineered to take water with clay particles suspended in it and clean it out. It was never ever designed to take water that is so contaminated by bacteria, E. coli, viruses, etc. It was never designed to do that. So it's not just about taking water out of the river. It is actually a failure, a systemic failure of the entire water reticulation system in that area. And I don't want to make it into a bigger crisis than it already is, but it's very important that people are alerted to the fact that the system itself has failed.
Is this situation reversible, Dr. Turton, or are we at a crisis point? You've already mentioned the word crisis a number of times.
Well, I spoke 10 years ago, I spoke about the slow onset disaster. So this is the end phase of the slow onset disaster. We're still walking around and we're still alive. So there's obviously always hope. And it's very important not to lose hope. So I don't think it's a hopeless situation. I'm very encouraged by the fact that David Makura has announced the creation of a water war room in Gauteng. That tells me that at least at premier leadership level, they taking it seriously. I think that is the right thing to do. Certainly, I'm going after this now to talk to some big business, some big financial institutions. There's a great will to take it seriously. There's also a tremendous amount of interest from financiers to actually get involved, because the government is bankrupt, unable to finance future infrastructure upgrades. So there's an emerging discourse taking place out of the public domain now about how to finance rehabilitation of infrastructure going forward.
You're saying government is bankrupt. Are we talking the actual Department of Water and Sanitation, or are you saying that government simply can't resolve this situation at all on its own, so we're going to have to use some private funding in order to try and resolve it?
Well, it's complex, but both of those. We know that SCOPA has currently got a review ongoing with the Department of Water and Sanitation. We know that it's got many billions of rands that is unaccounted for, so it is bankrupt as a department. We also know that the economy is in dire straits, therefore taxes going into the fiscus are under great pressure. We also know that a fiscal cliff is coming, so that civil servants are unlikely to be paid at the kind of salary increases that they're demanding. So all in all, this is a general economic crisis that people better qualified than I can expand on. So within that context, the simple fact of the matter is that government's unable to mobilize the trillion rand that is needed to fix up our infrastructure. So there's vested interest from the private sector, but the war on monopoly capital, of course, is still ongoing, so that has to be resolved. But there certainly there's a will from business and from financiers to get involved, simply because they have a vested interest in a stable outcome. So ultimately, we go into a new space.
Did I hear you correctly, Doc? You're saying 1 trillion rand is going to be needed in order to try and sort out the water situation. Well, is that just confined to Gauteng, or are we talking a countrywide?
You know, the number that's being bandied around now in the water sector is 800 billion. 800 billion. And that's being looked at as a problem because we don't want to spend that money. I'm part of a group of people that are saying that because water is an economic enabler, let's not be shy of spending 800 billion. Let's spend 1 trillion, but let's invest it correctly. Let's use it as an economic enabler. Let's go create this new paradigm of abundance whereby we create jobs through water sector deployment. We actually create or reverse the loss of investor confidence in our country. We restore hope and dignity to our people through this paradigm of abundance. So in this paradigm of abundance, 1 trillion rand is not a cost, it's an investment that will bear on long-term multipliers, because every single person whose job is restored will pay taxes. Every person whose job is restored will ultimately bring about stability in our country. This is where we have to head. We need this new paradigm of hope, and that's why the Water War Room is such an incredibly important entity, because that is the platform from which we can start bringing about this discourse of hope.